Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. I am coming to you from one of the great New York City recording studios. We're at Quad Recording. We're with Grandmaster Flash.
How are you, man?
Great to see you, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Pleasure
me.
to have you come down here and hang out with us, and you're going to share some math and some science with us.
Yeah, hopefully, I'm a little long-winded, so hopefully
It's all good.
there's heads out there that can kind of follow me
Yeah.
my thinking when I was a very young kid.
Yeah, we're all going to learn a lot. Yeah.
Thank you
So
so
should I
much.
refer to you as Dr. Grandmaster Flash?
Was he the Dr. Sadler or Grandmaster Flash? Or just Flash? Flash is fine. Let's just do Flash.
All right, well, the honorary
Right.
doctorate. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's very
Thank you so
cool.
much.
So
Thank
many
you.
honors through the years, and you're celebrating 50 years, right? And
Yeah, we're getting ready to celebrate this period here. And I must tell you, takes me back to 15, 16, 17, 18, when music was being played in a way that I was unhappy.
yeah.
And so I kind of took my teenage years, and when you're a teenager, the first thing you want to do is you think you're grown, you're chasing the hotties, when you're in the basketball court, you come in after hours when your parents tells you to come in this hour, you come in hours after, you get put on punishment. I think for me, my 3+ years was, all right, so I don't like the way music was produced or DJ'd. What are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
I have to be honest, it felt like a calling. I was really big on unscrewing the back of stuff and trying to figure out what are these little pretty colored little objects and what they're doing. And I ended up becoming like public enemy #1 in my house. I was unscrewing the hairdryer, back of the stereo, back of the television, just anything electrical. It just was so amazing to me, just drawing. So that's my humble beginning.
Right.
At Mom
That's
and Dad's house.
That's the kind of thing, though, that dissatisfaction with the status quo. That's what drives innovation. That's what moves things forward. So you learn the things you need to do to move things forward.
Okay, but I wasn't thinking that way. I was just mad. Okay,
But that's it, right? That's
I
the-
appreciate that. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
That is the actual the definitive way of looking at it. You see something, you say, sometimes it needs a big tweak, sometimes it needs a totally redo. One of the two. So here we are.
So you were looking for, if I understand correctly, an extended breakbeat, basically, so that you could do things with that and not have all the rest of the song that you couldn't really work over the top of.
Right. So pretty much, like, there were rules in Mom and Dad's house, and and when I do lectures, I do the long version, so I'm gonna try to give you the short version. Pretty much, the rules was, don't go in the living room where the brown box is, and do not go in this closet where Dad's music was. And me being one of the babies, I definitely was like, the hell no, little Joe cannot go in there. So what I found quite intriguing with Dad is he was a track worker for the New York City subway.
Mm-hmm.
And he had these tools, this pouch of tools, and I can remember being able to hear him when the door turns when he's coming home, and Dad would come in and he would go to the dinner table. Mom would make his dinner. He'd have his spirits, and he would go over to this closet that I wasn't allowed to go in, and he would pull out these square objects that had trains, people, cats, dogs, trees. I'm watching him. I'm like, what is he gonna do with that square thing? And he pulls this black disc out of this square thing. And he takes the black disc and he goes into the living room. And since I'm being accompanied by an adult, I'm watching him.
You're allowed.
Yeah, I'm allowed. So he takes a black disc and he puts it into the brown box and he presses his button and this long thingy thing goes up. The record falls. The arm thingy goes down it touches the black disc and sound comes out of the box. I found that to be the most incredible thing. Dad is a magician. How did he pull that off? So in my interest, I decided to watch Dad for a period of time. He'd come home, I'd hear him come in the door, he'd eat his dinner, he'd go over to this closet, he'd pull out one of them square things. This time it might be the picture of a watch or whatever it is on the cover. And he'd pull out another black disc and he'd go over to the brown box and then it would do the steps and the arm would go down and sound would come out of this box. And I remember watching him for weeks. And the rule was, don't ever go into the closet where Dad's music was and the brown box. Never go with the air. So after watching Dad do the routine for a period of time, I said, what if I? And I can remember successfully doing it because I had to get a chair from the kitchen, drag it over to the closet, step on top of the chair, turn the knob, pull the door open, and I just looked up and it was just like this big mountain of these square things. And I just decided to just grab one. Now mind you, I watched Dad for a period of time. So I brought the square thing over and I pulled out the black disc and I put the black disc on the silver stick and I put whatever that thing is called over the top. I pressed the button and I watched the whole process and the record drops down and music's playing and I'm in the living room dancing and anybody that was home was like, listen, Lil Joe, if Dad catches you, he's going to, and I'm not going to use the word that I really want to use, but we'll just use the word reprimand. He's going to reprimand you severely if he finds out that you are touching this record. So I decided, okay, I'm going to put it back. So I would go back and I would put the disc back into the square thing and put it back into the pile, and I would close the door. And he would come home, Mom would make him dinner, he'd get his spirits, and he'd go over to the closet, and he would say, Violet, Cometa, Penny, Lily, Little Joe, everybody come to the living room. Who was in my records? And he would go from higher to lower, so my big sister was like, come on, Dad, and she was his favorite. I knew it. Violet would be like, nah. Commander's like, I ain't got time for that, and this and that. And by the time he got to me, I'm shaking like a leaf. Okay, so the reprimands kept coming.
Yeah.
Had a pretty hot hiney after a period of time, but I could remember even crying, told to go to bed early, get my meal. I would get up early in the morning and I would wait for that sound of his pouch and the tools to go clink, door open, door slam, time him, go to the kitchen, get the chair, go to the closet, turn the knob, take out one of the things. He come home, tanning my hiney again. After a while, pretty much, I think I was kind of unstoppable. But then the big question was, when Dad is not touching the brown box, why isn't there music coming out of it when he's not touching the brown box? Where does the music live? So my mother was a seamstress. And I remember when I was sneaking to the brown box that I put my finger under it and there was something pointy there. I said, well, Mom has these pointy things too. So when Mom wasn't looking, I took one of her pointy things and I took a black disc and I put it on the platter and I turned it on, waited for it to go up to speed, and I took the needle and I put it on the vinyl. And I felt a vibration come through my fingers and I was like, okay, the music lives in the black tunnels. Mm-hmm. From there, Dad would have to chop my head off because now I'm really going deeply into this. And so then my interest in electricity was, unscrewing the back up to my sister's hairdryer, the TV in the living room, the stereo, whatever was electrical. And then Mom says, you have to stop doing this. You're taking apart these things and you cannot put it back together. So she sent me to Samuel Gompers Vocational Technical High School. And from there, I started to understand what a schematic was. We studied people like Edison, Tesla, Banneker, Ohms. I started to understand what was vacuum tubes versus solid state. What is the resistor color code? What is capacitors and what is their jobs? What is alternating current versus direct current? What is a breadboard? So now I'm really like thinking back, I was like really an asshole for doing what I did to my sister's stuff, because I started to really understand what these things was. So now I'm in a part of my life where I want to understand how the turntable works and why. So growing up poor, I lived at 2730 Dewey Avenue in the Bronx, apartment 2C. And right behind us in the Throgs Neck projects was nothing but junkyards, burned out cars, old amplifiers, receivers. So as I was understanding how these things work, I would bring a piece in from the junkyard and kind of jury rig things together. And in learning that, I'm saying, okay, so this record was recorded in mono, and this one's recorded in stereo. Why not call it double mono? They call it stereo for whatever reason. And then there was this trial system called quadrasonic. So for me, just like in the way music was produced, I could remember when Mom gave parties in the house, I would sneak out of the room and watch people partying, right? And when the drum beat came, the bodies were gyrating more when that part came. So I'm saying to myself, this is the best part of the record. And that's pretty much where my journey began with every great song, whether it's pop, rock, jazz, blues, funk, disco, R&B, alternative, Caribbean, Latin. Well, all great songs, there's a great part. So in using that analogy, I started to just listen to records. I dropped the needle down and listened for the drum solo part to come. And the drum solo part was like 5 seconds. That really pissed me off. I'm like, why is this part of the record, which I consider to be the best part of the record, why is it so short? So I started listening to DJs, and they were like mix shows on radio, BLS, and a few other stations, WWRL, and they would do these mix shows. And the way the DJs played there, I wasn't really happy with the music, but what was really intriguing to me is I don't know where one song began and one song ended. Like, it was flawless the way they went from one record to another. Later on, I found that it was a disco style of like blending. I'm like, okay, so that's the way that works. So then, the drum beat. I don't have that kind of time to do a slow blend. So that's when I started doing computations, and I started listening to music from a math and science perspective. But while I'm doing this, my friend's knocking on the door and says, we need to take you to see some other street DJs and see how they play. And to my dismay, I was quite perplexed. Why are these DJs playing? Why aren't they playing? Why are they playing the way that you're playing? Like no no thought of going smooth from one to the other. You know, later, the term I understood was called train wrecking, you know, where, you know, if one song could be 92 beats per minute, the next one, they may play as 120. I was really sad with what I seen. And I said to myself, I've got to figure out a way to take these short moments and make them hold hands the same way the disco DJ did it. But I had to do it in a quicker fashion. So I tried picking the arm up and putting it down, picking up the arm, and understanding the grooves of a record. Like the chances of you hitting the same spot is 5 billion to nothing.
Right. Pretty slim.
So for me, I looked at the vinyl and the turntable from a totally different perspective. I said, I got to stop thinking about sound and let's think science and math. Because if I'm going to be able to make all these different drummers, white drummers, black drummers, foreign drummers, American drummers, all hold hands, I've got to figure out a way to quickly get from off one to the other on time to the beat seamlessly. And that's where there was the flaws. And the flaws was the turntables that I was trying to use. I based it on this thing I call the torque theory. And the torque theory tells me from the platter standing still to the moment you turn it on, out of the state of inertia up to speed, how long would it take? So the turntables that took a whole turn had the weakest torque.
Right.
And those that had half that were a better torque. And the ones that were a quarter of a turn or an eighth of a turn had better torque. So that's when the hunt for the turntable started happening. Zenith, Magnavox, Pioneer, Fisher-Price. This is when I was going through these various turntables. And then one day I was walking down this area of the South Bronx, and it was a store. It was on Southern Boulevard and 167th Street. And the name of the store was called Vicmar, Vicmarr. And in the window was this most disgusting looking turntable, Battleship Gray. I'm like, wow. But I said to myself, let's go ask the salespeople some questions. So I said to the salesperson, I said, do you think it's possible you could take that turntable out of the window? Because I'm doing a study on turntables. And that was pretty much it. So the salesman asked me twice, you're doing what? I said, I'm doing a study on turntables. And he says, okay, I'll be right back. And he comes back with two big guys, size of you. and then one of them was nice and said, wait a minute, let's just go get Victor. Victor owned Vicmar. And Victor says to me, what is it you want to do, kid? I says, I just want to put my fingers on the side of the table because I'm checking something. Mm-hmm. It was my thing called the torque theory. So I says, please may I check this? So under guard, they took it out of the window, plugged it up, and I turned it on, and I looked on the side of it, and it had an orange light and these things that looked like the mumps on it. I didn't know what that was at the time, but then I put my finger on it gently, and it had better torque than the prior 10 turntables that I had just seen. And I says, this is going to be the turntable of choice. And it was by this little known company called Techniques. Mm-hmm. And the model was the SL23. I said, how much are the turntables? And he says, $75, and I needed two. So my first job, I would stand by the supermarket with my shopping cart, and any old ladies that needed like help with their stuff to their place, they would give me a couple of dollars. So that was my first job. And then my second job was I used to deliver swatches, material swatches, it was Crantex Fabrics, 1412 Broadway. So I had two delivery jobs, and I had to save up $150. I think I saved up $100, and then my allowance, where I was supposed to buy my coat and my school books, I took that money too, and I put it together, and I bought these two turntables. And from that point on, then it was a matter of where do I go from there? And, you know, making the story short, the ugly rubber piece on there was the big problem.
Right.
Mom was a seamstress. I had to figure out how could I get the platter to spin clockwise comfortably while I go counterclockwise or back and forth. How can I make a happy medium while I'm doing this? And so I had a chance to touch silk, satin, polyester, rayon, leather, suede. So I said, I came up with an idea. I ran to the nearest material shop, and I went through all the aisles, and I touched all the materials that Mom had at home, and I touched felt. And when I touched the felt, I said, this reminds me of grade school. Like, we would get 5 stars if we could cut out the ABCs and put the Elmer's glue on, and then if you got the neatest, the neatest project, the teacher would give you anything from 1 to 5 stars, And I said, this brings back a memory, but the problem with it, if you drape it over your wrist, is very limp. I'm saying, this feels right, but something is not quite right with it. So I went to the counter, bought 2 pieces the size of the record, brought it home, and I wait for Mom to turn her back, and I turned the iron all the way up hot. And I went into the cabinet and I got the spray starch. And I sprayed the starch on it, both sides. So now this limp piece now became what I called a wafer. Mm-hmm. And I call it a wafer because every Easter Sunday, Mom would dress us, and we would go to church, and we would go down this line, and the preacher would give us this white thing called a wafer, and we would eat that. So I called it a wafer. But then when I put the metal platter and then the felt on top of it, I still felt resistance because now the mumps on the side of the table was fluctuating. I'm saying there's not an ease of motion here. There's still friction. So I remember when I brought great grades home, Mom would make chocolate chip cookies, and she had this wax paper that she would use. So what I did was I cut out wax paper the same size of an album, and then I would put the wax paper on the metal platter that no longer had the rubber, and then I took the felt on top of the wax paper, and then I put the vinyl on top, and I noticed that I had very minimal fluctuation with me going counterclockwise or going clockwise. I called it a wafer back then, the 2 units. Today they call it a slip mat. Mm-hmm. So that problem was solved, and then more problems popped up. The stylus, spherical versus elliptical. And spherical, let's say the conical. The conical to me was built like a backwards J, and when it sat in the groove, although it sounded better, when I tried to pull the record back, it kept slipping out of the groove. Whereas the spherical needle was like a nail. And the record sounded more horrible, but it hung inside the groove, so the spherical needle became the needle of choice. Mm-hmm. And then at that time, there was the 2 types of cartridges, the ceramic versus the magnetic. The magnetic was a better sounding cartridge. And I think the first successful cartridge I used was Audio-Technica, the ATX-N1 was the model cartridge that became the model of choice. Now I had to figure out, how can I hear the record that you're not listening to and match a beat to follow that? So I came up with this thing called the peekaboo system. The peekaboo system, like when I used to play with kids, peekaboo, it's like, I see you, so I called it the peekaboo system. And the peekaboo system, all it is a single pole double throw switch. And what I would do is the left and right jack, I would cut either one of those, and those left and right wires would go, the positive and negative wires would go to the points, the left points of the single pole double throw switch. And then I would go cut the other one on the other side, and those positive and negative wires would go on the right 2 points, and then I would run the output point to an external amplifier to drive it. Mm-hmm. So, but the problem was with this mixer, I couldn't have the single pole, single throw switch on the table. I needed it where I could hit it. So now I put crazy glue on it, and I crazy glued it to the top of the mixer. So now when I hit the single pole, single throw switch to the left, I can hear what's getting ready to come next, size it up so that if this beat is here and it's a pop beat, and I play the next one, and next one's rock, but it's there. So when you're dancing, you're not missing a beat, So for me, I had to call this something, and that's when I called it the Quik Mix Theory, the QMT. And I look at people today, and it kind of makes me laugh, because it went from the human sampling that I was doing, because I was just cutting and pasting the desired area circularly. Now all of a sudden, these machines pop up, and they're called samplers. And you can put a piece of data into it and have a computer control it, and the computer will tell the sampler, take this piece of data and just keep playing it over and over again. So now it becomes electronic, and I think the most famous one was the Akai, the S900.
S900, sure.
Yeah, there were other samplers before them, but they were bullshit. But when you got an Akai S900, you was in the game, So for me, I say, people ask me what is my contribution to this culture, and I say, I didn't create hip hop. I didn't create the word. I created the tools that makes it possible for hip hop to be here today. Mm-hmm. And I say this is because if I didn't sample circularly, it would have not happened electronically.
Right.
And that led to the production of big records, and a lot of the early records in the 80s that had the insertion of samples were huge. But at that time, it was wonderful because the incredible producers, and I call them all from Dr. Dre to Premier, all the rest of y'all, the sample could be a white sample. It could be a black sample. It could be a foreign sample. It could be an American sample. And with the insertion of these incredible artists, with the production of the bigger drums and all the EQs on the board, this made hip hop fly off the shelves during this time, because this was a new way. So my contribution to this is I am the creator of the backbeat that made it possible for dancers to dance and for human beings to say their syllables on a clean bed of music. Mm-hmm. This is my contribution to the culture. A lot of times when people talk about music, they say a song, they say words and music. I say music and words, because the vocalist can't come into the studio. He can't go wherever he's going to go until the track is down. I was the track.
Right.
And the vocalists, the MCs, the rappers follow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd argue, though, that it goes a little bit farther than that.
Go ahead.
Because I would argue that you were looping as
That's what I called it.
But there's lots of different styles that are built on looping, and there's looping is prominent in a lot of different things that people are doing. So that idea has spread from there.
This is the reason why a rapper can have a clean, uninterrupted bed of music. This is the reason why sampling was created. This is the reason why we are unarguably the biggest music on planet Earth. I say it's the QMT.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Quik Mix Theory. 4 bars, 4 Bs, that means bars, forward equals 6 CCR. Counterclockwise revolutions equals full loop. Most songs become recognizable to the brain when you hear 4 bars. You know whether or not you love it or you hate it, or if it makes you feel good or it makes you feel bad. 4 bars is pretty much roughly what it is. So while this record is going clockwise, and this one is going counterclockwise, out of the 4 elements of hip hop, the breaker and the MC/rapper lived here. Microphone, dancer, hands in the air, whatever. I'm a bad drawer. But with me picking the desired area and looping it, the end result was a full loop. Today, the human being, MC, and the break dancer who did routines relied on this. Today, it's called rap. I did this about 48 years ago. Today, DJs play this way. Music in our community of hip hop is made this way. Rappers rap on top of this in this way, and breakers break on it in this way. And this is my formula, the QMT, Quik Mix Theory.
That's awesome. Man, that's just mind-blowing. When you see it laid out, it's like, oh, well, of course. But man, what you went through to get there, and all the, I think a lot of times we take for granted the subtleties of, you got to have this kind of stylus, and it needs to be, you got to take the friction out. We got to get the inertia right, and all those kind. That's all factors in there. But what I always wondered about was, how long did it take you to come up with the idea of 4 bars equals 6 rotations? Was that a trial and error thing, or did you do that mathematically?
It's because, and this is probably when I came up with that mathematical formula, when I abandoned the sonics of it and I was doing it with math, I said, so, 1, 2, 2, 4 bars. If it's 4 bars of music forward, I should be able to watch the line past the tone arm in reverse. If this, let's pretend like this is the tone arm. 1, 2, I'm going back to the beginning. 3, 4. But when I checked, I was in the wrong place. Let me do this again. So I would go again in reverse. 1, past the tone arm. 2, past the tone arm. 3, past the tone arm. 4, check. I'm in the wrong place. Why am I in the wrong place? I did it with a white break, black break, foreign break, American break. I was ending up in the wrong place. I think I got angry and I walked away for a little while. I think I was getting ready to trash the whole idea as a teenager. And then I said to myself, let's go back to the math. let's go back to the math. Okay, 4. 4 is the bars. Let me put the line. This is where this became necessary. The circular and then the intersector. These are the markings. Where the two lines meet is where the break begins. Let me watch the line. And when I watch the line, boom, doom, 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 doom. The line passed 6 times. I'm like, why? Why is the line passing the tone arm 6 times? So I went back to my computations again. 4 bars. Check. And then I looked down on a record and it said 33 and a third. The light bulb turns on. And now I do 6 turns and I'm arriving where I need to be. My best friend Easy Mike spent the night that night. I kicked him out of the bed and I said, you gotta come see this here. You have to come see what it is that I'm doing. I did various records. Early Barry White records were really good for me. And he's watching me extend this drum break percussively, knowing how the record really sounds. He says, so Flash, so this is why when I was asking Miss Sadler, are you coming outside to play, and you never did, I said, yes, this is the reason why. So that's when I started to piece together the QMT. 4 bars, 4 BF equals 6 CCR equals full loop. These markings became paramount for me to be able to count and see. The second part was when people dance, they go like that, like that. When they're there, I have that millisecond to slip in the next break so that they don't miss a beat. I says, so I'm not thinking from a sonic perspective, I'm thinking from math and science. Let's try this with a white break. And I marked it up and I let it play. And it was 6. Let's put a funk break on, let it play. 6. I put a disco break on, 6. I put a Latin break on, 6. So now I'm building the computation 6 counterclockwise of all genres of music that play at 33 and a third. You will re-arrive to the top of the break. I called it the QMT.
And part of the brilliance of it is then you can scale that. If you got 2 bars, it's
right.
3 rotations.
Because walk this way.
Yeah.
I remember going record shopping, and sometimes I'll buy a record because my secret was, let's say if the group was called Good Time, this drummer was dope, let's just say, but then the band broke up, I want to know where the drummer went. Because 9 times out of 10 cuts on the next album or the next group that he's playing on, he's going to get a solo. Mm-hmm. So that's how I was able to build my collection. But then, like you just said, the rule changes when it's 2 bars. Now it's 3 counterclockwise for you to re-arrive at the top of the break. And I remember when I was in the store and I'm looking at this album cover, I'm like, Toys in the Attic. It's a stupid name for a cover, but it looked pretty interesting. And I brought it home and I was like, oh boy. But then the problem was, I had to really, my dexterity and skills to not let the guitar come was important. I had to move quicker so that the would never show up. So for me, the rule still applies. Whatever the bar structure is, it's going to be in the quotients of 6, and it's going to be even numbers. I don't care what song it is.
Right.
The math is the math.
It's always 2 to 3 ratio.
Right. 2 to 3 exactly.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, right. And then it also, you can scale that to 45s as well. So you can, it always works. I mean, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it never fails. And I had to say to myself, I had to abandon sonics because if I'm playing the song, I hear it a certain way. If I give the headphones to you, you're going to hear it a different way. And you give the headphones to him, he's going to hear. I had to abandon sound totally, just math.
Right.
And here we are.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. What an amazing story. 50 years later, here we are. And the endless honors and you wrote memoirs and there's shows on A&E. Man, just people recognize.
It's wonderful, and I am not one to go around and say, hey, this is what I did, this is what I did. I'm just not that person. I'm very spiritual, and I think that for the young people, they need to know what was the origin of this and where did it come from and who did what and what did who. I think it's going to be a show and tell year. So for all the people that are saying what they did, you're going to have to prove that now because this is an information age. And these young people want to see the facts.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you do it?
Right.
And there's people that say things. I think I'm going to be in the front of the room and say, how'd you do it? Because I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
First. That's me.
I love it. I love it, man. Thanks so much for sitting down with us. It's
no problem.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
And one other thing. New figure with Super 7, right? Got the Grandmaster Flash?
Yeah, they made some superhero of me.
I love it.
I don't know what that is, but okay, I'll take it. My company and my management and my production people like, man, we need to make a figure of you. I'm like, why? Like, okay, let me make a figure of me. But it's all wonderful.
That's fun, man. That's awesome.
It's all good, man. Thank you so much once again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for sitting down with us. Really appreciate it. We're coming to you from Quad Recording here in New York City. Grandmaster Flash. Nothing more needs to be said. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.